to get in there, guys. I think we're good to go. Sorry, Bruce. Alrighty. We have video, we have audio. Let's see if we can get the application. You're on.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening in Toronto. It is afternoon here, and good morning in Singapore. It's great to have you all here. My name is Bruce Robinson. I'm the Dean of the Sydney Medical School, and we're going to give you a brief overview of the program here this afternoon, and then Kirsty Foster is going to speak specifically about some of the initiatives that we have implemented in order to try to make life returning to your home country a little easier for you. And in addition, we have two students, Kate from Toronto and May from Singapore, who are going to talk to us about their experiences of Sydney Medical Program and what it was like to move here to Sydney. So what I will talk to you about first of all is what we believe is really very, very important for all of our students, and that is that they receive excellent clinical training, that you have a meaningful research experience during the time that you're with us, and finally that you develop an international outlook or have an international perspective to the education that you receive here. We believe then that if you have all of those things, you will be very well placed to be a very valuable and useful contributor to the health and medical management of the patients who you'll be looking after. This is just a brief overview of the program, and I won't go through it in great detail, but just to suffice to say that we've divided the program into three stages: Stage 1, Stage 2 and Stage 3. Stage 3 runs over the last 2 years of the program, and Stages 1 and 2 each run over the first 2 years of the program. For those of you who are coming into the program without a basic medical science background, don't worry, because the first few weeks of the program are spent in what we call the foundation block. This is a very intense period, even for those who do have a basic biomedical science degree, but for those who don't, it's an even more intense period that people do find challenging. But I've got to say it's been really great to see all the students supporting one another through that really very difficult first 10 weeks of the course. At the end of the first year of the course, I would also give you comfort in letting you know that we can't determine any difference in the performance of the students who come into our program with a science background versus those who come in without a science background. All perform equally well in the examinations at the end of year one. That foundation block is then followed by core blocks in a range of different disciplines that are listed there on all of those on this slide, that run through the remainder of Stage 1 and through Stage 2, covering in significant detail all of the basic clinical and also the public health aspects of the disorders that you would encounter in each of those areas. And then in Stage 3, you spend all of your time in the clinical school. In these first 2 years, you spend a day a week in the clinical school, and in Stage 3, you'll move into the clinical school full-time, where you do rotations, fairly standard rotations through medicine, surgery, perinatal and women's health, critical care, community medicine, child and adolescent health, psychology and addiction, and you also do an elective term. This is a term when many students choose to spend time overseas. For the Canadian and North American students and the Singaporean students, some of you elect to go back to your home country, and Kirsty will be talking about programs that we have to facilitate that. and then you do your pre-intern term, which is the final 4 weeks of the course, which really immerses you in the wards, functioning as if you were an intern, so as to make the transition to internship in your first year post-graduation as smooth as you possibly can. You'll all be aware that for this year, for the second year, you'll be enrolling in the MD degree here at Sydney University, and that means that you'll be doing a specific research project that will be underpinned by a course in research methods, followed by a research project that you will do that is a core component now of the MD. This just maps out the timetable, and I don't put this up for you to take down the detail of it, but just for you to realise this is a very full program. There aren't a lot of breaks in the course, and in some of the breaks people will actually spend time studying. So it is a full-time course. In the first year or two, some students manage to do some part-time work, but not many students can manage to work part-time in years 3 and 4 or stage 3 of the course. So if you're banking on being able to financially support yourselves in years 1 and 2, you can probably do a few hours of part-time work a week, but I think in years 3 and 4 you really should count on being required to be present full-time, thus really precluding any employed work outside of the course. Now, the clinical training is probably one of the highlights of this particular program. It begins in the first few weeks of the course, and I think one of the reasons we're able to offer you such great clinical training is because of the excellent hospitals that we have associated with us here at the University of Sydney, both metropolitan hospitals and also hospitals in rural New South Wales. So they're listed down on the side of this slide. The names of those hospitals won't mean much to you at this stage, but I'm sure you can all Google them. You'll certainly find out where they're located and also perhaps what they're each recognised for being most specialist in. We do want you to also gain very good scientific and as well as clinical training, and I'm pleased to say that we're able to provide that to you because we've got a really fantastic faculty of people who are arguably leaders in their fields. Our program is an integrated program, so as I said earlier in one of those earlier slides, as you learn about the case of the week, if it's a cardiology case, you'll learn about the anatomy of the heart, the physiology of the heart, as well as clinical aspects of cardiac disease, and you'll also learn about population and community aspects of managing cardiovascular disease from a population basis. We also provide support for students in their learning, and in fact the students themselves have formed a number of student support groups. The surgical students who have a surgical bent have formed a surgical student society. We also have a North American Medical Students Association, and we're in the process of developing an association that will help provide support to students who come to us from Southeast Asia. So there are a number of opportunities for students to engage in extracurricular activities and also to embed themselves in some of the special societies that have been developed by the students themselves to support one another in their training. This is a student hard at work. You will be one of these students, and you're going to hear from 2 of such students in a moment. We have to actually show these photographs like this without actually showing what the student is doing, because we would be in breach of various confidentiality rules if we were to show what was happening here. Now, just a final couple of words about internships. As you know, we as a medical school here in Australia cannot guarantee international students an internship. We are still waiting on the final outcome of the allocations for internships this year. Last year, I'm pleased to say, all of our students did receive an internship placement. This year, it looks like about a half to 2/3 of our students will end up receiving an internship offer here in Australia. And because that's of great concern to us, and obviously of great concern to you, we've implemented a number of additional programs in order to try to facilitate students obtaining internships in the countries that they have come from, if that's what they want to do. Each year, usually about half of the students decide they want to stay, and about half decide they want to go back to their home country anyhow. So if at least half to 2/3 of the students who want internships are able to get them, it is usually, or to date it has worked out that everyone has ended up with an internship either in their home country or here in Australia. And we hope, although we can't guarantee, again I must emphasise, we do hope that students will be able to gain an internship. Now, just to talk to you about some of the specific programs that I've mentioned, particularly the Pacific Bridge and the USMLE Boot Camp, I'd like to introduce Professor Kirsty Foster, who's going to come and stand in the appointed space just there. Kirsty is our Associate Dean International, and she's been very much involved in particularly developing Pacific Bridge, but can also talk to you about the USMLE Boot Camp.
Yes, hello, and congratulations on being successful in obtaining a place at the Sydney Medical Programme. We really look forward to welcoming you here. As Professor Robinson has said, we are very aware of the internship issues and the fact that you're concerned about them. So the Pacific Bridge has been developed in response to this to assist you, and what that means is there are flexible arrangements for international students. These arrangements are not available to our local students, so international students are permitted to apply to do one 8-week block in fourth year, the final year of the programme, either in medicine or emergency medicine or in family medicine, to apply to do that in their country of origin or their region of origin in the case of North America. We have this program is relatively new. In fact, this year about 8 of our students have spent that time overseas, and it's been highly successful. And for 2015, we have 22 students, international students, who've already been accepted to do that or said that they're interested in doing that. This is, of course, helpful in getting additional experience in your home country, and more importantly, good references from potential employers there. This is in addition to the elective term, when all students in the programme can choose to do a health-related activity, and about 60% of the total number of students in our programme choose to go overseas. As you've already heard, and as you know from our website, we are very keen that Sydney Medical Programme graduates are globally engaged, and we have quite a number of exchange programmes internationally. But what you will be interested in, I think, particularly is the Pacific Bridge. So both North American students and students from Singapore have already taken up this option, and even more of both Canadian, US and Singaporean students are planned to do that next year. The USMLE Boot Camp is another initiative that was started in 2014, and we are continuing, which involves a very intensive program to assist students who are planning to sit the USMLE. We had academics from Johns Hopkins University in the US over to assist in the tutorials, and of course our world-class academics here involved specifically in helping students to prepare for that exam. The downside of it is it was done sort of over the Christmas New Year period, but all of the students who did it were very pleased with the opportunity and felt it was very beneficial, which is why we are continuing the programme in 2015. So those are the options. I think we'll have time at the end to take questions if you've got any other issues, but that's an overview of Pacific Bridge and USMLE Boot Camp.
Thanks, Kirsty. So now I would like to introduce Kate, who's a Stage 1 student who's from Toronto, who's going to talk to us about her experience of coming to Sydney Medical School, what it's been like, what it was like to find somewhere to live, get a bank account opened, etc., as well as her impressions of the course, first of all. So Kate, thank you.
So hi everybody, I'm Kate, I'm from Toronto, and I just finished my first year, and I'm very, very excited to be done. Moving here was definitely like a big jump, and at first I thought like, oh, it's going to be the exact same thing as home, I won't have any transition troubles, and There was a little bit, but for the most part, like getting set up isn't too bad. You should give yourselves a lot of time before you get here if you're planning on renting an apartment that's not through like an organized building. Like a lot of my friends lived either in like Sancta Sophia, the on-campus housing, or in like Uni Lodge or Sydney Uni Village, and they didn't really have to give themselves much time coming in early because they had already arranged all of their accommodation before they got here. But like I wanted to just rent an apartment, so I ended up getting here about a month early and living at a hostel until I could find a place. And you kind of need to do that because you can only look for housing on Saturdays, because that's the only day you can go look at places, and it takes a great deal of time. But once you kind of get settled, like getting your bank set up is really easy. There's banks all over campus, and you can just go. And then depending on like if you've been using like OzTrek or one of those companies, they have kind of welcome events. You get to meet people in the class, and the Facebook page for your group, for your cohort, will probably be up before you even start. So we were starting to get gatherings and have barbecues and stuff with our classmates before school even started. So that was really helpful in terms of like meeting people and getting settled in. Other than that, I was at the Northern Clinical School, so I was at Hornsby Hospital, which is a smaller part of North Shore, and it was really great. Like commuting wasn't a pain at all. Like I ended up living really close to campus, and the Sydney trains they're quite efficient. And now they've switched over to a card system where you just load up money onto an Opal card and you just swipe and go, and it's really simple. I don't know. There's lots of fun things to do. My boyfriend and I did a 100-kilometer charity walk while we were here with other people from the class. You can get involved in like med review, and they have intramural sports that are kind of a nice way to relax because everybody's involved, and you just take a couple hours and try to beat dentistry at a sport that doesn't exist in Canada, and then it's really embarrassing when you don't know how to play touch footy. But that's the point. So maybe I'll pass it over to May here, who's here from Singapore, and let her answer some questions. And then if I think of anything else, I'll try to add something.
Thanks, Kate.
Hi everyone, I'm May. I'm from Singapore, and I'm a second-year medical student, so I just finished my second year this year, and it's really good. So more about me, like I said, I'm from Singapore, but I did my undergraduate in Melbourne and foundation as well, so I've kind of been around in Australia for quite a long time. Yeah, so moving over, it's pretty good. The weather is really great as well over here. It's less unpredictable compared to Melbourne, so that's good. I guess for some of you, this might be your first time living away from home, but don't worry, Sydney's pretty safe to live in, and everyone's really friendly here. I feel that the locals here are also really friendly, and you get along with them really well. In terms of accommodation, like Kate mentioned, there are a few on campus. So, like for example, Sydney University Village, but there's also heaps of accommodation that are around campus, and they're really within walking distance. I'm from Nepean Clinical School, so I have to take a train to Nepean once a week. I live near Central Station, so it's really easy. It just takes me about an hour train ride, and then I have to walk to the clinical school. But it's not all that bad. But for those people who are in Nepean Clinical School, I probably recommend moving closer to Nepean in 3rd and 4th year, as commuting can be quite a hassle, or for those who don't really like commuting. I feel that in Sydney Medical Program, we have a very strong community and support network. We have buddy programs in place where they pair up senior students together with the first years, and that happens at Nepean as well. I feel that was really useful for me in first year, as I had a lot of questions, and the seniors were able to answer my questions as well as give me tips and tricks and tell me kind of like what textbooks were essential and what resources that I could use. There are also many events held by the Sydney Medical Society which will be held throughout the year, and that's good for meeting new people and kind of mingling with your cohort. In terms of the teaching staff, I find that they're really friendly and approachable, and I feel comfortable approaching them at any time if I need any help. so that's really good. For non-science students, there's also non-science tutorials held, and those are really, really useful, and I recommend all non-science students to go for them, and even those people from a science background, if you want to go for them, I think you can as well. Just to like brush up and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's about it that I have. Yeah, I just found that everyone was really friendly here, and it was really easy to fit in, and that we were able to mix with people of different nationalities, and those friendships and networks that we make would really help us in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, May. So look, what we might do now, we've printed out some of the questions that people have posted earlier on, and Kate will go through and answer some of those, and then we'll open it up and we'll actually answer the questions that people have been typing up during the course of this webinar. So, Kate.
Okay, so I have a list of some questions that people submitted in advance, so I'll go through some of them. Somebody asked about how much money that you should bring on the plane with you. So that like greatly depends on what you're planning on doing like immediately upon arrival. So if you're booking yourself into a hostel, and you should probably double check that if your credit cards are going to work here, so call your bank and let them know you're moving. And then other than that, maybe a couple $100 until you can get your bank account and everything set up. In terms of people looking in terms of like the opportunities to work while you're a student in first year, you do, I guess, with your student visa, have an allocation of about 20 hours a fortnight. I think you can legally work. I got rejected from every job I applied to upon arrival here, including laboratory work and the grocery store down the street. But there are people that have successfully found jobs. I know some people in our cohort were working as TAs for first year undergraduate biology courses, so that is an option that you can look into. And then I'm sure other people have more marketable skills. Okay, in terms of picking which clinical school you want to go to, they all have kind of different things about them that are really great. So I would say base it more on like if you kind of know where you want to live, and then do like a Google Map public transit search to each one to figure out how far it will take you, and that might change your mind. Let's see. Yeah, in terms of like somebody asked about like safety in Sydney, and May addressed this report. Like I've never felt unsafe at any point in Sydney. I don't know, just basing it, I've lived in Toronto and Montreal, and I'd say Sydney feels generally safer than both of those cities. Not that they're unsafe cities, but anyway. In terms of bringing stuff from home versus buying it here, everything here is super expensive, so expensive. So if you have this space in your suitcase, or if you're like debating whether or not paying the $50 to bring an extra bag on the plane, probably bring an extra bag on the plane. Like there's like Kmart and Target where you can buy $4 disposable like child labor garments, but at the same time, you're probably better off to bring it from home. And books and everything, I bought all of my like heavy text and stuff. But yeah, I'd say lean towards bringing it. Somebody's asked about resources to bring. If you really wanted to bring stuff in advance, or I'd say some people bought like the USMLE First Aid Stage 1 book, and other people have copies of the Toronto notes, either like electronic copies or physical copy might be good. Hold on, let me see. Sorry, I'm just looking through. In terms of like different like videos and stuff that you can use to prepare, what I found was amazing this year is that so many people from our course would just post like every resource that they came across. We had a huge like a Facebook page with all the links. We had a Dropbox where everybody would post resources they'd found, links to videos, summaries that they'd made. Everybody really worked together to kind of create this huge mass of like knowledge that we could all use and share, which was awesome. So I wouldn't worry too much about that in advance, but when you get here, you'll start to see that it snowballs into a great resource. So I think that's it from the previously submitted questions, so I think I'll pass it off with some new ones.
Okay. So thank you, Kate. Now, people have had the opportunity during the course of this webinar to post questions for us. Just to emphasise a couple of things that Kate said, one of the things that happens every year, and I'm really pleased about that, is that the group does work together very, very well. There's an enormous amount of support that the students provide for one another. both in terms of emotional support, but also in terms of supporting one another's learning. So don't worry about that. Unless there's something particularly pathological about the incoming year, I'm sure it will all be fine. So we've got other questions that have come through, Robert?
No questions yet.
Just one about the clinical school. What should I consider when choosing a clinical school?
Okay, so this is a difficult question, and everyone asks this question each year. Kate touched on it, and so did May too. Each of the clinical school has slightly different characteristics. The PM, for example, is a little bit smaller, and students comment that when they go there that the experience is perhaps a little more hands-on and one-on-one than it is at some of the larger clinical schools. On the other hand, the PM clinical school, for the first 2 years, you have to attend a day a week, and it's an hour-long train ride to get there. As May said, though, in years 3 and 4, nearly all students who are at Nepean Clinical School live near Nepean, and in fact we've bought, as a medical school, we've bought an apartment block out there where students can live very inexpensively immediately adjacent to the hospital. At the other clinical schools, there are some slight differences in the clinical areas that they're most expert in, but generally they're very equivalent to one another in terms of what they offer students. Concord Hospital, for example, though, does not do obstetrics, and so students rotate from Concord to the other hospitals in order to do their obstetric rotations. And one of the things that we have been contemplating is even rotating students between clinical schools just as a matter of course, so that they actually get some exposure to other clinical environments other than the one that they're primarily linked to. There will, however, always be a primary allocation, a primary linkage for each student. It might only be one rotation that a student would do outside of that clinical school.
Question refers to you about Pacific Ridge.
Just repeat
the question. So for Pacific Ridge, is there a preferred institution to do a rotation? If not, is there any list of schools which have worked well?
Yes. Yes, the question is for Pacific Bridge, is there a preferred institution to spend this time at, or if not, is there a list? There isn't a preferred institution at the moment. As I mentioned, it's quite early on in it's really just coming into full fruition in 2015, and so up to now, students have self-organised their placements. We do have the one arrangement we do have is with the University of Toronto. We have 6 4-week places with them per year, and because of the timing that they have specified, they are only available for Pacific Bridge. They're not actually, they can't take students in our elective time, so it means that the international students have full access to those 6 4-week placements for Pacific Bridge, which is very good for you guys. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're collecting from the students who have already been, their reflections and whether they recommend the placements that they've been at, and we're looking as to whether to just have formal agreements with those places which are looked at as could be preferred partners for us. So that's a work in progress, but we're certainly collecting the information from students who have been there previously for future students considering places. The other thing that we have in place is that we're a member, Sydney Medical School is a member of the Global Health Learning Opportunities Programme, which is a programme which has preferred partners. Medical schools have to be approved to join it, and clearly we've been approved to join it, and that does mean that students of those universities can more easily arrange electives at other universities, and that applies to Pacific Bridge placements as well as the elective placements.
So the next question is about research. It's a lot of students. Do we select and make contact with the PRs prior, or are we supervisor?
The question is about research and whether you make contact or you're automatically assigned to a supervisor. For the MD programme, each of the clinical schools is organising their own group of research tutors, and there is a process of where students get a list of the supervisors on types of projects that are available for the MD, and then can put in preferences to be allocated to whichever supervisor and topic they wish. And that has worked well this year, which, as you know, is the first year of it. It's worked extremely smoothly, and as far as I'm aware, there has been no issue with it. Everybody, all students, have been very happy with where they have been allocated and which research supervisor their MD tutor they've
Maybe
got.
Kate could just comment on
Yes,
that.
Kate's going to come and give you the students' view.
So yeah, there was a lot of options given for each of the clinical schools. Like, I think that there were like 10 different broad categories just for like my home clinical school. Plus you get some of the options that the Children's Hospital and the Rural Health Group put together. So you really have a lot of different things that you can choose from, and you rank your top 5, and then they go through it and some computer magic happens, and then suddenly you're like, yeah, you got your project. I got my first choice. Most people I know got like one of their top 2 choices. And now we've just kind of started up where we're having our group meetings. And so you'll have more than one. You're not the only person with the same research tutor, but everybody has their own individual project. So you work kind of like, I'm doing a pathology project, so we're all looking at the same protein, but we're all looking at different tumor sites, for example.
Fantastic. Thank you.
A couple of questions about internships. So when do we get to apply for internships? And if you're in the process of applying for residency, what's the best arrangement? And if you do your internship here, where can you use it in the US?
Okay, so first of all, people apply for internships in about August or September of the year, just prior to them going to take up that internship. If they are, the internships are then assigned, the local students get assigned internships first of all, and then subsequently the state government assigns internships to some of the international students, and then there is a Commonwealth government, a federal government, that is the Australian national government, has another Commonwealth supported internship program which will begin to allocate internships to students thereafter. Unfortunately, one of the problems of this current system is that some of the students being allocated to Commonwealth supported places don't actually know that they've got an internship until just before or even just after the new year. And so they end up having to hang around waiting to see whether an internship has been obtained. Now, the way that students, of course, can get around this is if they become permanent residents. Permanent residency is generally obtained by either marrying someone or having a particular skill set that enables you to qualify for the 100 points that you need in some other area to obtain your 100 points that you need for permanent residence visa. Once you've obtained an internship, your internship here in Australia, at the completion of that internship, gives you the ability to practice in Australia, but it doesn't automatically qualify you to practice overseas. It does qualify you to practice in Singapore, because the Singapore Medical Council has now accredited the Sydney Medical Program, so a qualified internship here does enable you to practice back in Singapore, but that's the only country where that's the case. Malaysia we have an agreement with, and we think that Malaysia will also accredit students who are graduates of our program as well. But any student who wants to go back to Canada or North America has to either do the Canadian exams or the USMLE in order to be able to apply for an internship there.
There's a question for Kate. If we start moving to Sydney, if we know people's future roommates in Australia who are planning on inspecting houses in early January, do you think we international students would be okay moving a little later?
So, sorry, the question is that whether if they know who they want to live with.
Yeah, if they've got some arrangements in place, they could come here a little bit later, or they still should move.
You might still, I definitely give yourself, I think giving yourself any less than 2 to 3 weeks would probably be putting a lot of stress on you right as you're starting the course, just because since they only really have apartment viewings on Saturdays, and you'll go and you'll look at an apartment and there'll be 30 other people lined up around the corner to also look at this apartment, and then you have to submit an application to get the apartment. You can't just say, oh, I want to live here, here are my 5 roommates. You need to have like your bank statements. We had to write a cover letter and had references from our old employers, and then you can only have 1 pending application at a time, and then you have to wait again until the next Saturday to see other places. If you're looking for like a regular rental apartment, I would say try to give yourself as much time as possible. If you are just planning, like if you're individually looking for a room within like a share house, that's a little bit easier because you can come and then it's less formal, so you don't have to do like a whole application project. Like there's a website called like flatmates.com.au, and a lot of people use that website to get like a room in a house.
Well, thanks, Kate. Just a couple of other things I've been reminded about. In terms of choosing clinical schools, on our website there are brief videos of 3 to 5 minutes about each of the clinical schools where some of the staff and the students who are at those clinical schools will speak. Just to reinforce what Kate said, I think it really would be important for you to get here at least 2 or 3 weeks before the course has started, because just the process of settling in generally takes longer than you think. We also think that one of our former students, who's now actually an intern back at Harvard Medical School, produced while she was here a handbook for students coming from Canada and North America, and we believe that that handbook is still available on the Sydney University Medical Students website, Medical Society website. It's got a lot of very, very useful tips in it. Did you use that, Kate?
Yeah.
Yes, so Kate and May, did you use that too?
No.
Okay, all right. So I think, though, having read it myself, I think you would find it a very, very useful resource.
So it's just whether there's a question about clinical school allocation. Are they random? Do domestic students have priority? Just trying to work out.
Yeah, they are not. They are random. The only thing that we're not randomising is the distribution of males and females. Sorry. The question was, what is the allocation system for each of the clinical schools? It is random, although based upon students' preference as well. But the only thing that we don't randomise is the allocation of male and female students, so that we end up trying to match the number of males and females at each clinical school.
So there's a couple more questions about Pacific Ridge and University of Toronto arrangements. Under the Pacific Ridge program, do we have access to rotations in any specialty of choice, or are they limited? And could you just expand a little bit on the Toronto arrangements? I think there was a glitch in sound.
Oh, okay. So the question is specifically about the Pacific Ridge Toronto, University of Toronto placements, because I think maybe you didn't hear what I said before because of a glitch in the transmission. And also about the specialties that are available. Basically, what we do, it's actually certainly for this year, which was the first year, the first students going on this placement were selected at the end of just a few months ago, and it was quite competitive for these placements. So the students who were selected, the 6 students who were selected, were able to put in preferences to Toronto. We try and get this selection done early to maximise the opportunity for them to get their first preference of specialty, but it's not absolutely guaranteed. But certainly, and the other thing to bear in mind is, although it's early in your career so far, but what we also did was encourage students to balance what they were going to do in Toronto with what they were scheduled to do or had done in their other 8-week medicine block, because most of them are going for a medicine placement. So in general there is some choice, but it is not absolutely guaranteed. And these placements are possible in the most students who are going in the 4 weeks immediately, the 4 weeks in the block after the elective placement. So many of them who've arranged to go to Canada for their elective or North America for their elective are staying over there, arranging, unfortunately it's actually the second 4 weeks of that, but they're arranging another placement on Pacific Bridge for the first 4 weeks of that medicine block, and then taking up the Toronto placement for the second 8 weeks, which means they're able to stay overseas for, immediately after their elective.
Just one additional piece of information about clinical school allocation. Most students, of course, look on the website and can work out the geography just as well as I can and know that Prince Alfred is immediately adjacent to the university campus, and so most students do put down Prince Alfred as their first preference. Obviously that means that not all students will get Prince Alfred, and so if you really are keen to try to get your first preference, I'd encourage you to look at all of the clinical schools and to think about what one might also serve your needs.
Question about South Africa, about the rural clinical year in stage 3. When the applications for this, as I've read somewhere, it's quite competitive and needs prior planning.
We were also told at the rural info night that international students can't go, so we want to clear that up.
Yes. That's true. Yes, so the federal government runs the rural clinical school program, and so international students are not able to go to those rural locations unless there are places left that are not taken up by local students. Now, many of the some of the international students do get to go to the rural clinical school that's located in Lismore, but they tend to only be able to go there for a 4-week block. I don't think any, Kirsty, have been able to go for the whole...
Actually, for Lismore,
Right.
for Lismore at the moment is actually the only place that international students can apply for the 32-week placement along with the local students. The School of Rural Health at Orange and Dubbo is in the situation where local students can only apply and international students will only get there if a vacancy arises. But we have had several international students who've been able to go up to Lismore, which is in the north of New South Wales, for 32 weeks. And as Professor Robinson says, there are additional opportunities for shorter term placements, but the short terms are between 6 and 8 weeks.
Some more questions about housing for Kate and May.
Right.
How competitive would you say the rental market is in early January in general? What are tips for international students? And how difficult is it to get into on-campus housing? Because that might be easier.
So if you just repeat the question first, because
So the question was about on-campus housing. I know a few of my classmates who stay on campus. I think you have to apply as soon as possible to be able to secure a place, but it should be pretty easy to get a place. If not, there's other student accommodations around, such as Urban Nest or Igloo, which is right near Central Station, and those are also available for rent.
If I could just add to what May has said, the competition for the on-campus housing is quite intense. Having said that, medical students are generally preferred by the colleges because they're thought to be more sensible, a little bit older, and so less trouble to have in the on-campus housing. But if you do want to apply for that, you should be getting your applications ready right now.
I suppose the other thing is that the medical students start earlier than the other
Yes.
students, so you've got you've got an advantage because the semester 1 for non-medical students doesn't start really till the end of February, beginning of March, and you're in earlier.
As far as competition for housing in the vicinity of the university, it is quite intense. As Kate said, you might arrive at a house on Saturday morning and there might be 30 other groups all wanting to put in an application to get that housing. Obviously, if you choose to live closer to your allocated clinical school in the suburbs of Sydney and then commute into the university each day, that process will be a lot easier and the competition won't be nearly as intense.
There's a question about the match rate in Canada and what sort of rotations.
You know the answer to that.
It's about half last year. I think it's 13 students, 13 in the first round were matched in Canada, including single places.
Okay, so the question was about the match back in Canada. I'm just being told that the rate of match last year was 13 students out of approximately 50.
It was 30 in the first round, and that's up close to 70% applied back there, first place in the first round.
So the statistic I'm being told now is close to 70% of the students who applied to the Canadian match ended up being matched back in Canada. And some of those were matched at very good places like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, McMaster, etc. So it wasn't as if people were all matched to the Boondocks. People were being matched to really good hospitals for this internship.
Question about the dress code for medical students.
You need to wear a tie. If you're a man, you need to wear a tie.
The dress code for medical students is neat and tidy, no thongs or sand shoes, but you don't have to wear a tie, and in fact students are being discouraged from wearing ties now because they're thought to pose an infection control risk.
That's only in the hospital.
That's in the hospitals. Here on campus, people wear almost anything and sometimes nothing.
You would be shocked at the amount of Australians who don't wear shoes. Like, they just walk around barefoot all the time. So, honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about it as long as, like, they don't wear shoes.
But they do in the hospital. But you do too in the hospital. Closed shoes.
Yes.
No one asked about snakes and spiders or anything yet.
Do you know how most, this is a question for May and for Kate, how most international students finance their MDs?
Do you want to answer that?
So the question is about how most students would finance their MD programs. I'm currently on a parent scholarship, so my parents are funding my medicine program. I'm not too sure about others.
I'm on the TD Canada Trust Owns My Life plan. So yeah, most people that I know from Canada, it's a combination of like the private bank loans, which vary between like $150,000 to $200,000 to maybe $250,000, like depending on which bank you're talking to. And then on top of that, got like your provincial, like OSAP, or like whatever your provincial coverage is. And depending on how much you've been working in the previous years, you might not qualify for a lot of money from your province right away. I know that I only qualified for about $8,000 from OSAP for this year, but I think it will be more for next year since I didn't have income. But yeah, it's definitely a combination of bank loans, family money, trying to get some like odd job stuff when available. And then kind of crossing your fingers and hoping the interest rate doesn't change.
Fortunately, the exchange rate has just moved in favour of the students from Canada, North America and Singapore. I'm not so sure about South Africa, unfortunately, but that is at least one plus. In the last 3 or 4 months, the exchange rates have improved about 15% in your favour.
There's a question about university scholarships for medical students.
Unfortunately, there are no university scholarships for medical students. We do provide some scholarship support for students to undertake the elective term. That's obviously competitive, and it's open to both domestic and international students, with no preference being given to either group. Do you want to add anything to that, Kirsty?
No, I think it's good, important for you to know that there are a number of scholarships available for electives. Both there's a number of Dean scholarships which give flexibility to the student who are the students who are awarded those can choose where they want to go on their elective, and then through the Office for Global Health we have quite a number of scholarships which are tied to, for instance, scholarships to go to Vietnam, scholarships to go to Cambodia, and so on. So one to Zambia. So a number of those scholarships which people can apply, all students can apply for.
Quick question about how long the research component of the MD is.
The research component of the MD is starts as Kate indicated. She's just started. Her group has started towards the end of the first year of the program, and it runs in parallel to the rest of the program the final assignment is due to be handed in can be handed in just before the elective term, so at the end of third year. The equivalent is it's about 8 weeks full-time equivalent stretched over that length of time. So it's not too onerous across that length.
Is there a clinical mentorship program?
They're not a formal clinical mentorship program, but one of the great strengths of the Sydney Medical Program with the system of having a home clinical school is that most of the clinical schools have varying degrees of buddying programs. May already discussed the one at Nepean, at Northern. There is a JMO program where interns and residents are matched up with a small group of first, and it continues into second year by popular demand of the students group to assist them in really in getting into and working in the clinical setting. And other clinical schools have similar sorts of near peer teaching and learning, but there's not a formal mentorship program as such, because experience shows that it suits some people and not others. So really in the clinical schools where there's the maximum number of students in any 1 year in one cohort at a clinical school would be about 65 to 70. So with that smaller group, the staff at the clinical school, and there at all clinical schools there are, as well as the academic and clinical academic staff, there are professional education support staff. So there is the wherewithal within the clinical schools, particularly for people who are have got particular challenges or needs, to match them up with someone who can assist them on a one-on-one basis. Yes, May would like to add something too.
So there's something I like to add. For Nepean Clinical School, because I think we're smaller and there's less international students there, I think, I'm not sure, but we have this Nepean Mentor Student Scheme where some of the students will be chosen to be paired up with mentors like GPs or other surgeons, and I feel that that's really helpful for our learning. Yep.
There's a two quick questions, and Rob's going to do one. If somebody has research experience, can they get an exemption on the research component?
The question is, if someone has research experience, can they get exemption on the research component of the course? And the answer is an emphatic no, they can't. But it's important that we know that, and a survey goes out to the first year students to ascertain the degree, if any, of research experience that people have, and that is taken into consideration in the group. The MD research tutor is aware of that research, and that person has obviously has skills and experience which will contribute to the group experience, and will be encouraged to do something, either taking their research on or in a different field with a different type of research. In that, I mean, this goes along with the philosophy of Sydney Medical Program, that people's diverse experience. So, as you've heard, we have many people who in the program who do not have a basic science background, and that is a deliberate strategy on the part of Sydney to enrich the knowledge, skills and experience of the group, so that when you're in your PBL groups or your small groups at the clinical school, there is a different range of skills, knowledge and experience that can be shared amongst the group, and the same applies to the research component.
How does problem-based learning work, and are there lectures? Is there lecture-based learning?
Yeah, the Sydney Medical Program uses many types of learning and teaching. The PBL program, one of the students might like to add to this too. But the PBL program, which runs in first and second year, there is a PBL every week, which a problem-based learning. So a clinically based problem which relates to the other teaching, the lectures, the practicals, the anatomy, and so on that is happening that week. So it's very carefully constructed so that the students can immediately apply the knowledge and skills that they're learning in the lecture theatre and the laboratory to a clinical case. So that works all the way through first and second year. In those 2 years, the focus of the PBLs is on mechanisms and a thorough understanding of pathophysiology and how that might translate into signs and symptoms. And then in third and fourth year, the PBLs become clinical reasoning sessions where the students take on each student has a responsibility to prepare a real case each week that's related to the problem, the issue of the week, and present a real clinical case. There are tutors along with the group for most of those sessions. Do you want to add anything? No?
Thank you, Will. I'm going to have to just duck off, but I know there are a couple more questions. I look forward to seeing all of you here early in the new year. We'll have a drink together as a welcome function, and enjoy your Christmases wherever you are. I look forward to seeing you here early in January. If anyone has any specific questions that haven't been answered during this session today, and you may wish to ask a couple more live now, if you do have specific questions, then just email Felicity Barry, whose email address you will have. Thanks and good luck.
Are there any more questions? Are there any more questions just now?
There's one.
Oh, I think there's one just coming through, so hold on.
There's one just again about the supplies, which you buy white coats and stethoscopes before you come.
The question is, would you buy white coats and stethoscopes before you come? Despite the photograph that you saw, we do not. Our medical students here don't wear white coats really, so you don't need a white coat. A stethoscope is probably a good idea to have, because you don't want to be using any old stethoscope you find on the ward. Best to have your own one. Do you want to give some advice about that?
Yeah, so we don't do like the short white coat, but you will need a lab coat for your anatomy labs. I bought mine here just because my old one was covered in chemicals I wasn't sure I'd be allowed on the plane with. And in terms of buying a stethoscope, you're probably better off buying it online. It's probably the cheapest way. If you get I think most people tend to get the standard Littmann, the one everybody's got. And they do come in a variety of colors. And I asked my clinical tutor before I bought the bright pink stethoscope whether or not that was an appropriate thing to do, and was told that yes, it is. So if you want one in peacock blue, go for it.
Absolutely, it entertains the patients who are often quite bored.
There's one question for Rob about Wi-Fi.
G'day, Robert Pearce, IT for the faculty. There was a question earlier on about Wi-Fi upload-download limits. Are there any? The answer is yes and no. The university network internet access is provided for students to support their work. If you happen to do some recreational browsing with a small amount of downloads, such as Facebook or something similar, no one will blink an eye. But if you utilise the university network to download Season 1 or whatever of Game of Thrones, it will not be looked upon well, and just a word of warning, all of your browsing is tracked. So when you browse, think websites that your mother would like to see, not other ones. Thank you.
So two final questions here. Is there any recommended pre-lecture reading review material? That's the first one. And then how are students evaluated academically?
Okay, so the first question is there any recommended lecture material? I'm terribly impressed that you are keen beans and thinking about that now. Long may it continue. Basically, if you're I mean, I would recommend that you wait till you come, but yeah, and Kate's nodding her head. I would wait till you come. Once you're here, there is a lot of material goes up on the Compass website and on Blackboard, which is a learning management system that's used here. There's a lot of material, and certainly if material goes up and you are asked to read it before a lecture or before a session, then clearly the tutor will expect you to have done that. But I would wait till you're here. The second question, sorry,
Academic
oh yes,
evaluation.
the second question was about academic assessment. There are a variety of assessments, and there are barrier summative assessments at the end of each year, but to help you in your studies, particularly in first and second year, there are a number of formative required formative and required summative assessments throughout the year, which are designed to, particularly obviously the required formative ones, you will get feedback, and they're there to help you judge how you're progressing throughout the year before you come to the barrier at the end. The barriers at the end of each year are in the form of single best answer papers, and there are also clinical assessments, objective structured clinical examinations in first year and in second year, and long case clinical exercises and OSCEs in stage 3. That's a basic summary of the assessment. And I think that's all of the questions at the moment. So as Prof. Robinson said, if you have any further questions or something that suddenly comes to you after we've finished this webinar, then please email them to Felicity Barry, who will assist you or forward them on to the appropriate person. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for being here today, and we very much look forward to welcoming you to Sydney Medical School in the end of January, beginning of February. See you then.
Signing off now.
Yeah, I had to open that up. It's just so hard. Stop being. I couldn't breathe after a couple of